Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the World Affairs Virtual Open House. My name is Jonathan Visbal. I'm the Chairman of the Board of Trustees, and we're going to have a great opportunity to interact with our CEO, Philip Young, today. But I wanted to just kick it off and remind everybody that we have, that being World Affairs, a very rich 73-year history. World Affairs Council was actually formed in 1947 following the San Francisco Conference that established the United Nations. In January of 2019, Jane Wales, who had been at the helm of world affairs for 20 years, announced her retirement. So the board of directors, the board of trustees, engaged in a selection for a new CEO. And we spent 10 months on that process, and there was 5 things that really drove the search. First and foremost, we really wanted to have a clearly defined value proposition. We wanted to have the organization have a higher profile than it had. Of course, we wanted to increase funding. We wanted to have a broader audience and more relevant content. So in October, Philip Young joined us as our new Chief Executive Officer. And Philip has some impressive credentials. Let me read some of these to you, just to give you a background before I turn it over to Philip. His career spans academia, public and private sectors, and nonprofit organizations. Prior to joining World Affairs, he was the Chief Operating Officer for Plowshares, and he was a Vice President of the Asia Foundation before that. He was also a Pan-Tech Scholar in Korean Studies at the Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center at the Stanford University, and a Vice President of private equity firm Hambrick & Quist in Asia. Philip was also a presidential appointee at the U.S. Department of State, where he served as senior advisor to the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. Concurrently, Philip worked as a senior advisor to 2 U.S. coordinators for North Korea policy, that being former Secretary of Defense William Perry and former Undersecretary of State Wendy Sherman. As a member of the government working group that managed the U.S. policy and negotiations with North Korea under President Clinton, Philip was part of the U.S. delegation that traveled to North Korea with Secretary of State Madeleine Albright in October of 2000. So we were thrilled to have Philip join us. And since October, he's been really working on those 5 areas. And he put together a very strong vision in February that he presented to the Board of Trustees in our strategic offsite. And Philip's going to talk more about that because it's really focused on world affairs having more of an impact and a purpose. Well, of course, in late February, the pandemic hit, and it really changed everything that we had put in plan. Now, we still have aspirational plans, but things changed. Now, fortunately, we've been working very, very ardently behind the scenes, and we were able to secure a payroll protection program to keep us going. And now that we're really battening down the hatches, we wanted to reach out to you to really get a good understanding of what you really want from world affairs. It's going to be important for us to ensure that our members and our audience are being served. Philip's got some great ideas. We want to have them tested out on you and get your comment on that. So please send us any questions you have. There's a little Q&A button down at the bottom where you can send us questions, or you can virtually raise your hand and Hana Harasaki will call on you so you can ask questions of us. So again, this is a virtual open house. It's for you. We look forward to your input. And Philip, let me turn it over to you at this time.
Okay, great. Jonathan, thanks for taking the time to be with us. I really enjoyed in the last few months working with you. And I wanted to thank everyone here who's listening and who's part of this for participating. I hope you all are safe and well. We're now in our 12th week of sheltering in. It's something that my kids are here in different places. My son just had a remote recital, which I was able to see while we were waiting. So that was great. So again, I hope you all are doing okay. We've been meaning to do this for a while now. And, things happened with COVID-19. We were going to present this whole new vision about where we were going to go. And then COVID-19 hit, and then we started running in terms of trying to get us to where we needed to be in order to come out on what we hope will be on the other end of all of this. And we can certainly answer questions to you about the organization itself. I think the big thing is that we're okay. It's not going to be easy. It's not easy, but I think we've done a lot of good things right now to keep us in good stead, to keep our staff, and to keep on offering you all of the programming that we think that you want. The objectives for this meeting are really two things. There are really two sets of questions that I was hoping to get from you in this conversation. And I will talk maybe about 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll just open it up. The first question I wanted to ask, and you'll understand the context, but I want you to be thinking about this, is what are you interested in right now? And what do you want from us? So that's the first set of questions. And then the second questions have to do with the kind of model that we're talking about. What will it take for you to be excited about what we're doing, in the sense that you'd be willing to introduce us and talk to your friends about what we're doing, and the value proposition that we present to our community, because that's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on you in the Bay Area and our community that sees us regularly. So those are the things that I wanted to do, was one, get your thoughts on these two specific issues, but I also wanted to take a few minutes to talk about, for you to get a sense of who I am. Many of you I probably have met, some of you I have not. And so in that case, I thought I would talk a little bit about sort of who I am and the things that I want to try to bring to World Affairs. And I'm going to do this quickly. So first, I just wanted to let you know that when I came into this meeting, I came into thinking about this job and talking with the selection committee, I led off with what I thought are my touchstones. These are the things that make me tick. First, it's the notion of community, that we're all part of something, that there's a greater meaning that we can all be a part of. So that's the first thing. The second, I believe in common ground, and that's what's so perfect about World Affairs. It has to do with nonpartisanship. The third, I believe that we need to constantly grow, that all of us, if we just stay still and stagnant, it's not going to do us any good. We want to learn. And the final thing that that is really important to me, that I talk to the selection committee about, is that I'm all about doing something. It's about action. And I want to do something that's meaningful and that has impact. So those are the touchstones that I bring to World Affairs. In my view, the organization and the world has changed so much since it was founded 70 years ago, even 20 years ago when Jane came on board and led this organization in an amazing way. I think, and the board has asked me to refashion and remake World Affairs for the new world. In my view, I feel that the model that we have now, which is relatively too passive. It's a model in which all of you are asked to sit down and listen and hear people talk about certain issues. And every once in a while we have the ability to ask questions, but to me it's much too passive in a world where we're all connected by internet, and you can get a lot of the information that you would normally get in some of these live programming. So for me, what I wanted to do was make what we're doing more relevant and more accessible to everyday busy people. That's one thing that has been very important and overarching for me. What I'm saying right now is that I believe that the function that we've had, which we've talked about, convening and connecting, is still very important. But I think the other sort of tagline for us is about doing, action, and meaning. And what I'm hoping to do is to give all of you, our community, our supporters, the opportunity to participate in all that. So in a way that I look at our branding and what I promise all of you is that I'm hoping that we are going to be able to allow you to make a difference in the world and be able to do so from the Bay Area. So this is what we're thinking about. And so when we talked to the board in February, I talked about the new program emphases, and I'll just sort of rattle these off. And if you have questions, you can certainly ask about them in our conversation. The first is something what I call action projects. It's something that you all can participate in and do something. To me, it's doing it from the Bay Area, and it's a project that is what we call scalable. It's a seed project that if it works, can be used elsewhere. The second thing are understanding that people are looking for different opportunities, different ways, particularly in this world right now, different skill sets. And we wanted to aim that at younger people in terms of what are the skills that they're going to need in order to succeed in this new, very complicated world. Third, I wanted to talk about good news. I want to emphasize good news and examples of leadership. It's all good and well to say the world is sort of in a difficult situation, but we really want to go to the place where we say, okay, the world is tough, it's difficult, but what can we do? And that's where we want to show examples of what people in fact are doing. We're going to be focusing on the radio program, more about that in a second, more partnerships. We are a platform and we want to be an aggregator for different kinds of people in news. And then finally, I think that we want to emphasize a California perspective. From my view, I think that we're going to be in partisan gridlock in Washington, D.C. for some time to come. And so it becomes important to us here in San Francisco, the Bay Area, and California to lead the way, because that's something that we have always done. Now, in terms of implementation, we have one of the things we just had a board meeting about where we're going in the world. And one of the things that I took away from it is that we're all looking at the world BC and AC. Before coronavirus and after coronavirus. And so, you know, before coronavirus, as Jonathan said, we had the board was ready to go, the staff was ready to go. We had this vision. I was authorized to use more money, hire more people, and move forward. And we were all excited about what those possibilities were going to be. And then literally 2 weeks later, the coronavirus and sheltering in hit. Everything put hold, and we had to do a hard pivot. And so what has happened is that having those programmatic touchstones that I talked about, action projects, growing opportunities, good news, we had to, and a California perspective, we've had to completely refashion in a different way. And so what have we done over the short term? Well, there are three things that we've done on the short term. First is that we've doubled down on the radio program. And if you haven't heard the radio program, I urge you to do so. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised in terms of what you're hearing. We started implementing over the last 3 months slowly program changes. We're still experimenting, but think that you'll find that it's a much more accessible product. Secondly, as you can tell, we shifted hard to virtual programming and remote programming. The reality is a lot of our programming was live and it was in person, and we can no longer do that. So the team has done an incredible job of trying to go over to these new platforms, like probably all of you are doing as well. And then finally, it's the emphasis of social media. And we're really pushing on that. I think we want to do a little bit more, but I think that will come. Over the medium to longer term, however, and this is really some of the topics that I wanted to talk with you about, is we're not exactly sure what the future is going to bring. I mean, it is completely uncertain. And so here we thought it would be a really good time for us to reach out to some of you and to our members about what is it they're looking for. As we start over the summer to start thinking about longer term, what we're going to be doing. And I know that Daniel, our Director of Development, has sent a questionnaire to all of you, which was, get some of your feedback that way. And the town meeting right now is something that we want to focus on. So let me just lay out 5 or 6 points that we're thinking in terms of what this new world is going to look like, and some of the assumptions that we are working under for the next several months. The first one is that the habits that we have gotten as a result of COVID-19 over the last 12 weeks are not going to go away anytime soon. We think we're going to continue to do the things that we're doing right now, and we don't think in the after coronavirus period we're going to go back to the way it was. It's simply going to be very difficult to do, particularly when we don't know if there's going to be a vaccine anytime soon. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we believe that there are going to be successive waves of outbreaks that are going to happen. It's going to be sort of like whack-a-mole. You hear something here, you're going to shut down. Those are the things that are going to be constantly with us. finally, we think and we know that live in-person programming is going to decrease and maybe go away for a while. Fourth, we think that the anxiety and the difficulties because of coronavirus are going to continue and are as high as ever. And I believe personally, that the anxiety, disorientation that has always been there in a latent way because of all the changes that are happening in our society. But right now, coronavirus has brought that out before. And we think that there is a need that people are yearning for in terms of meaning, in terms of purpose, in terms of doing something. Remote programming means geography is less important. So in certain ways, that means an organization in Boston can connect with us here and vice versa. So it is a challenge and an opportunity. And finally, and the most important thing, we think COVID-19 has shown that a global perspective, that insight and understanding the world is more important than ever. And so that is why we think there is a place for us in everyone's everyday lives. So with that, here are the two questions that I'm hoping to send to you all and for you to reply to. And then we can, more than happy to answer any questions you might have about anything else. So as I said, I think that the membership model where we have all of the membership model it's probably not sustainable in this new world. For me, the membership model is way too transactional. You all who are members pay $200 or $150. And what you're doing then is it's natural to say, am I getting my money for that $100 membership fee that I'm giving? Some of you may go to a program once or twice a year. Some of you may not. But we think that we're wondering if it may be necessary to try to get people to think about world affairs in a different way. For you to be thinking about making an investment in our mission and being part of something bigger. So in that circumstance, if you can think about it, one, does that make sense to you all? Two, what are you interested in over the next few months? If we can't do live programming, is the remote programming okay for you? Do you have ideas about what we might want to do instead? And then finally, I keep on talking about this to our board is what's going to get you excited about us? What is going to get you excited about to the point where you'll be willing to introduce us and be our messengers for us in terms of joining and being part of this larger community. So with that, let me end and just open it up to questions. And Jonathan, maybe you can moderate or we can go from there.
Great, thank you, Philip. Well, we've got a couple of questions. There are ones that come in already, and I'll read it here. And it said, speakers addressing the issues of the day and maybe interest groups around various foreign and domestic policy areas with a special track to assess the effects of COVID-19 broadly on foreign and domestic policy. And Philip, you might want to take that on because we've had quite a few programs now on COVID-19 on KQED.
Yeah, we've had a number of programs on KQED. In fact, one of the things about the programming is we've made it over the last 2 or 3 months always touching to some degree on COVID-19. In fact, we had a program back in March when we started to make this pivot with Larry Brilliant, who is a world-known epidemiologist who helped eradicate smallpox. His program that talked about COVID-19 and what it might mean was actually, I guess, one of our biggest podcast downloads. I think it was over double, maybe even triple to what we normally get. So this is something that is important, is what we're trying to do more and more of. I think the live programming that's being done remotely is talking about what does the world going to look like after COVID-19. We just had a program, that live program that went on, I think it was last week, and I can't remember, Rebecca, a Harvard Law School business school professor, that talked even about the notion of capitalism. Do we have to relook and get a more enlightened form of capitalism as a result of COVID-19. So if those are things, I'm glad to hear and read that this whole COVID-19 thing is something that you all seem to continue to be interested in and want to hear about.
Thank you. There's another one that came up, which is you'd mentioned action-oriented projects. Could you provide an example?
Yeah, so I get that question a lot. So the action-oriented projects that I'm thinking about I was thinking about, the criteria. And the criteria that I want to do is, one, that it was a big issue. It was something that involves a big issue. Two, that there's something to be solved or can be done. Three, it involves technology. Four, it is something that can be done in San Francisco or remotely, and everyone can participate in. So let me give you one example that we're thinking about. This is a relatively modest one, but it's an example of something that we think may get some traction. We're talking to some people about this. So one is, in my world, in North Korea, there are a number of Korean Americans who have come up to me and said, is there something that we can do to somehow help U.S.-North Korea relations? And one of the things that I thought about was one of the biggest difficulties that we've had, challenges, is there's not a lot of information about North Korea. The more information we have about North Korea, the better we can make decisions. And so what can everyday people do related to that? Well, there's something called Google Earth. And what we thought about doing, and I have thought about, was we're going to try to put together, if we can, a crowdsourcing project. We think that traditionally people have used satellite analysis to look at nuclear weapons, to look at missiles, to look at different kinds of military-related things. But there is a real value in mapping North Korea or other countries that have nothing to do with military issues. So if you create a baseline of what North Korea looks like now, you can then 5, 10 years from now, or even next year, take a look at that same place and see how it's changed. So the argument is that if we had done something like this 10 years ago, and then we started and we knew what North Korea looked like, then it would be very easy to see how much, for example, sanctions have really impacted North Korea, how much development has occurred. And so what we're doing here is trying to find funding, and we may get some, about crowdsourcing the mapping of North Korea. And so the promise there would be, do you have 30 minutes? You can help us map North Korea for some larger project that is going on later. And the idea is that we would we have some experts who are great at satellite analysis, and we could train people in an hour session. And then we could have them take 30 minutes, go on Google Earth and start mapping what they see, and then we put it all together. And if we get enough people, after a year, you could probably say you've mapped the whole country. It's pretty amazing what you can do. So that's one project where it is something that we can do here in the Bay Area. It is something that involves technology. It is something that, if it works, can be used in many other circumstances and other situations. And I think more than anything else, it will probably create a community of people who are really into doing something related to North Korea in this context. And it only takes 30 minutes, right? So that's one example. I've got a number of other examples that we could probably do and very excited about. But that's just a more concrete way. When I say action project or doing project, no one knows what I'm talking about. But that's specifically an example of what we can be doing, and I think will make us different from everyone else in this space.
That's a good example. Thank you on that. What that also flows into, being more hands-on, and that hands-on involvement. A question comes up here is, would you consider smaller group interactions with notable speakers in person or via Zoom?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. I think remotely, it just sort of depends, how much time people have. But I don't think there's any reason why we could not do that if there was a real demand. Or we could maybe, there are other options of an hour's time. We divide it in 30 minutes, and then we can make it smaller so people can have some real interactions with folks. So that's a good suggestion that we can certainly take on.
Great. We have another one that's just come up right now, which says, in terms of enhancing membership options, I'm interested in the board's interest in supporting a book club. The activity is one that is amenable to both online and in-person participation. Certainly, we have interviewed a number of authors in the past, and they're excellent speakers. But I don't know if we've really thought about a book club. What are your thoughts on that, Philip?
Well, for me, this World Affairs is the members organization, really. So if there is enough people that are interested in doing something like that, that's certainly something we would, we could consider. And I think that doing this remotely actually makes it a lot easier in certain respects. And so that might be a really interesting thing. I mean, the person, Gary, I don't know if you can type anything or if you want to come on board and speak out loud. I'm just curious what you would be thinking, and then what your suggestion might be about how we would go about doing something like this. I don't know, Hannah, if you can let Gary on or not, or if he's interested. Gary, great. If you could maybe unmute, tell us what you're thinking.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, great. Good to meet you.
So, well, I appreciate the fact that you want to talk about this.
Yeah.
So, I'm currently a member of a small book club. I'm going to say 10 to a dozen. And we currently meet at the Mechanics Library.
Mm-hmm.
However, before the pandemic hit, they raised the price of our renting a room. So we're kind of looking for a home. We may go to a library, or if World Affairs is interested, maybe this could serve as a seed, if you will, for a bigger program. The way this book club that I'm currently participating in is structured is, first of all, they meet monthly, and the genres of books that they read differ each month. So one month it's fiction, another month it's nonfiction, another month it's classics. There's no reason at all why we couldn't include a category associated with, you mentioned that we often have authors come and talk to us about books on various topics of interest to the membership. So there's no reason why we couldn't incorporate something like that. We've got an author coming up, say in July.
Yeah, yeah.
And our book club meeting is mid-June. Well, there's no reason at all that we couldn't include the book club reading that book at their book club meeting, and then they're kind of geared up to interact with the author in July, something like that. But
no, I like
the general framework.
Yeah, I like that idea, because I was thinking that, I would, if our director, our vice president of programs, she maps out pretty far and ahead. So if we know that there's somebody coming in has just written a book, you all could read it. And I think it would be kind of cool for our members to have read the book and actually interact with the author, whether it's remotely or not. I like that idea, and that might be a way for us to do something that is, again, if this is what interests people, I really like that. So thank you.
Well, Philip, in any way you want to use me to help, sense what the interest of the membership is, or put together a little prototype to present, or whatever you require, I'm happy to help out.
Oh, that'll be great. So what we can do is, reach out. My assistant, Hannah, can reach out, and then we'll figure out a way. We're a small staff, but if we can get people like you who are really, who can volunteer, who can help us sort of put this together, that would be great, and try it as a prototype.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got another question here, and since we're on the Asia topic, and I've seen David Bloomberg, you know, sending out a link to everybody about you know, a satellite view of North Korea and South Korea, which is interesting. We also have another participant, Donald Meyer, who was an active member long ago, and now he resides in Hong Kong, and wants to know if we're going to have any programs about the developments in Hong Kong, and that's quite topical with what's going on right now. And you know, what Mike Pompeo said yesterday, that they're not autonomous anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So Don, yes, we absolutely are going to be doing Hong Kong. We did one back in, I believe it was December and January. We have been talking to people about Hong Kong to some degree about COVID-19 and that context as well. You can be sure we're going to be doing more on Hong Kong, definitely. One of the things that we've been doing on the radio program that is kind of cool, I think, is that we have been able, because of our contacts, been able to get a lot of NPR correspondents to actually be on our program to talk about what they're seeing and hearing. So for those of you who are not familiar with the radio program, it comes on every Monday nights at 8 p.m. here in San Francisco on KQED. You can get it live streaming if you want, all of that. But what we've done, the old model, the old format was very deep, very rich, but it could be also quite dense in the sense that the way it worked is that we did a live program, and what we did is that we would clean it up and then put it on the radio. So we would have essentially an introduction, and then we go have about a 50-minute conversation with one individual. Now what we've done is divided into minimum two, sometimes 3 or 4 separate conversations. And many times we would have reporters from that part of the world to be talking about that if we can't get an actual principal for a particular subject. And that has all been very interesting for us. And so Hong Kong has definitely been one and a topic that we are going to focus on even more. And I'd love to get your feedback. I'm curious, I mean, if you could come on, how did you hear about this? I mean, you know, you're in Hong Kong, you don't listen to the radio program per se, or do you? I don't know if he's going to be typing or not. Oh, Don, go ahead. You're on mute. Hannah, can we unmute him?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you. Welcome.
Okay. So I'm on the email list from World Affairs Council. As I mentioned, I was quite active years ago when I lived in the Bay Area. And so it was through the email that I saw this program. And,
oh, cool.
And in some respects, this post-COVID world, having events like this rather than physically is advantageous for somebody like me.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I mean, as we were talking about before, you know, after COVID-19 AC, you know, there's no reason why we can't engage someone like you if our content is rich and we're doing something that, you know, is compelling, right?
Be happy to be involved.
Yeah. So tell us, so what I would do is I would encourage you to, you know, go to our website, listen to the podcast. We've got a bunch of different programs, and, you know, this goes for everyone who's listening. You know, feel free to send me topics, things that you want to be covered. You know, you're the ones who are listening. We're doing this for you. We're doing, and if what you find interesting, you know, we have only a relatively small staff, so we're always looking for ideas. So please feel free to just pop us an email and say, think about this, or do this, or I know someone who's doing this. Okay.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
And thanks for calling in from Hong Kong, Dawn. And we've also got a question which is right up your alley, Philip, from Nassim Kadir, where he says, how about creating a few centers of excellence like climate change, public health and technology, cybersecurity, and then get the community to participate in their area of interest? And I know this is something you've really been thinking about.
Yeah. So, you know, how can I describe this? The model that we used to have at World Affairs was really what I called opportunistic. It was if someone happened to be coming into the region, into San Francisco, because it was a live program, People, if they've written a book, always want to come here. And we'd always put them on. Now, what's great is that it's usually fairly, contemporary. I mean, it's usually pretty relevant. And we didn't have to pay the cost of someone coming to San Francisco. But I don't know if you could say there was a general theme about what it is that we did. And in certain ways, the analog for me is that it becomes a Christmas tree, right? We're doing everything. And it causes a lot of stress on the staff because they're reacting rather than being proactive. So what we're doing is, as I described it, is partnerships. So partnerships we're doing with other organizations. If they bring people and will help with that, and they're the ones who are going to be providing most of the effort and manpower organizing it. But we're now focusing or trying to focus on core areas that are most important to us. And so I call them the big buckets. And the big buckets that I'm thinking about, that goes back to my touchstone about doing something big and important. I want to do something that is going to really make an impact on the world. And so when I think about the large issues, Nassim just talked about them: climate change, pandemic, technology disruption. I think nuclear weapons may be another. And quite frankly, I think it's diversity in decision-making, women and women empowerment, as well as diversity in thinking. So those are we're in the process now of articulating what those are going to be. And I think you will see probably over the next 6 months or so, the themes coming out. Now, centers of excellence, we're not a think tank, but this is where I'm looking at doing projects. The action projects will focus on those areas, and we will gather and collate and curate excellence within those bounds. And I think it would be, once we get these up and running, I think it'll be very exciting for individuals to participate and interact with those people in those specific kinds of projects. So again, those are big buckets. And for example, we have this thing called the Global Philanthropy Forum. The topic is climate change. And now we're going to figure out how it connects with COVID-19. We have an annual gala, which was supposed to be early May, which got postponed to November, is also about climate change. And we have Jerry Brown, we have Marcy Frost, who is the head CEO of CalPERS, whose investment decisions have changed the way people do things and do the kinds of companies they invest. And Sylvia Earle, who's a world-known oceanographer. She is amazing. And those are the people, the combination of government, of the private sector and business and finance and the NGO community are all there. And for me, the formulation has been the only way we're going to deal with these big problems is to combine all those sectors. And I think this is what these action projects are going to do. It's going to bring people from the tech side, from the finance side, from the expert policy side, to do all these different things.
So David, I see that you're on the chat side, David Bloomberg. Do you want to chime in and speak here? Because you're concerned that everything is too conventional and you're looking for alternative points of view.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, gentlemen. Nice to see you, Jonathan. You're looking fantastic. Very fit.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Philip, well, actually, Philip, I've never met you. Jonathan, I know from business school years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm a longtime fan of Jane Wales and just think she's the cat's meow, awesome lady, miss her. And Jonathan, don't know you at all, but you've done very bright, very plugged in. Here's my thing. When I was very young and just coming to a new city, I would always join the World Affairs Council because it was a great place to meet people, network, build relationships. Often the large corporations in the city would send, relatively high-ranking people, and so it was a very good place to meet. Now, I don't think the COVID thing is going to go on forever, so I'm not sure that this virtual model will be forever with us. But for now, that networking function is not so obvious, not so easy in this mode, except if you can build probably vertical channels of interest. So special interest groups where people are getting together to talk about a specific topic, of interest. And those can be birds of a feather kinds of self-organizing. You could put topics and people sign up and so on.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I'm a venture capitalist, so I think a lot about business models. So I'm empathetic with your question about, will a transactional membership model work? I don't know the answer either. I don't know if anyone does. How much, can we go into budget? How much of your budget has been like major sponsorship from like Chevron and the big foundations and so on relative to the membership part?
So for most, how would I describe this? Membership has always been a relatively small amount of money.
That's what I would figure.
Yeah.
So maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe maybe don't worry about it. Like, I don't know if it's useful or not to if you have to spend so much effort to get a little bit of money back, it may not be worthwhile. It may be a public service that large organizations are willing to sponsor, donate, something like that. I don't know, that's aside, that's one issue. So you have to think that through. Then there's the issue of what would be interesting now. The bad thing about COVID is that the networking in person doesn't work. The good thing about these lockdowns is that everybody is willing to do virtual webinars, seminars. Every author in the world, every public intellectual is now available anytime, pretty much, or on very short notice. So you can really have your cat's meow, any choice you want of somebody. So now I get to my main point.
Yeah.
As a San Franciscan, I feel very often in a minority in my intellectual perspectives. I read the New York Times, I watch CNN, I listen to NPR. To me, they all are exactly the same. It's a giant echo chamber.
Right.
Okay,
right.
You could probably know where I'm going with this.
Yep.
I feel like there is no diversity of thought, or very little diversity of thought. Now, there are a few places right here in the Bay Area, but not, who cares? Hoover Institution, Pacific Research Institution, down in Los Angeles, Prager University, other groups that have, let's call it less conventional, you could say more conservative, more limited market, more free market, more libertarian points of views being expressed, more skeptical of some of the environmental issues you brought up. Very human rights oriented. Those groups are very, very human rights oriented. So you'd find a lot of areas where there'd be commonality, for example, on freedom for Hong Kong, freedom for North Korea, those issues. But I would love it to hear a different point of view, because so much of what we get is just repeating, everybody agreeing with each other, and Trump is bad, and Nancy Pelosi is great, and maybe that's true. I just like to hear people who can challenge and with respect and politeness and integrity show different points of view, so that we have diversity of thought, which is to my mind more important than diversity of gender or shape or size or color, all that.
So let me say, I could not agree with you more. So just to let you know, I grew up in Ohio. I'm still in contact with a number of people from Southeastern Ohio. I was worried early on that Trump was going to win based on friends that I knew who I found were childhood friends who were gung-ho Trump. My wife is from the Central Valley, which is another country as well. And it's important. Yeah, it's important to go there. I love going there because it just allows me to get a different perspective. So yes, bottom line is, yes, we need to bring more people in. We're going to do that. David, I'm an old venture capital guy too, but one of the things that I would like to do as an example for you all, as another doing project, action project, is we have a long established educational program that exists for high school students. And one of the things that I realized is, well, let's take our comparative advantage, high school students. Bay Area, not so diverse, right, in terms of outlook. But we also have contacts, and I do personally, through my wife's family, it's schools and high schools in the Central Valley, which are very conservative. So I'm thinking, as I said, my touchstone was common ground, right, and leadership. So the idea, I said, well, what if we did this? What if we got 25 high school students from the Bay Area that we normally are able to pick? We get some really amazing students, but generally pretty liberal. What if we picked another 25 students in the Central Valley who are also very capable, very smart, but are conservative? Okay, and what we do then is ostensibly we create not a model UN, but we get some people, we can beam people in now. We get people on a world project of that's really important, like water or food or something, all right? And so ostensibly what you're saying is you're bringing them together to work on something, but what it's all about is for them to learn how to work with someone who looks at the world completely different. Now, because, this was pre-COVID-19, we were thinking about creating a platform that's already exists and modifying it so these students could interact regularly under certain and creating a town square, a modified town square that was self-enclosed so they could work together on a project.
I have a suggestion for you. It's a great idea. There's a really nice model. Are you familiar with the Copenhagen Consensus project?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've been looking at that.
So
why don't you explain to people who are listening?
Okay. This is a friend of mine, Bjorn Lomborg. He's a Danish statistician. I think he's a PhD, also economics, political science. And anyway, he started out working for Greenpeace with the Club of Rome, famous bet between the Stanford professor Paul Ehrlich versus the famous economist Julian Simon. Paul Ehrlich from Stanford said the world was overpopulating, would run out of resources in the mid-70s. Julian Simon said, no, that if that was true, then prices of commodities would rise. That never happened. Prices of commodities have always been going down generally. So in inflation adjusted. So Bjorn said, wait a minute, I'm a pro-environment guy, and I was reading all the headlines about overpopulation and environmental problems. Why was I wrong? I must have been reading the wrong stuff. So he started going to the source data, not the headlines and not the editorials that were perspective. He said, I got to look at the core data. He started doing that, and he found a lot of what he thought was not correct. And he was really self-challenged. So he's been on a mission now for the world. He's neither right nor left. He is trying to move things in an efficient way of what they call Pareto optimality. Let's do the most with the least resources. We have limited resources. We have limited foreign aid budget, for example. How do we save the most lives? How do we help the most people? So he does these wonderful projects, just like you described, where they get people not with a fixed ideological point of view, but just random students. If you can pick random, you can pick diplomats, you can pick business people, you can pick student, whatever. And then you get them together and you say, okay, here's the problem. We're going to have you hear from scientists and then economists. And those two say, what is the best science on solving this particular problem? Tuberculosis, global warming, loss of the polar bears, corruption, war, whatever problem. And there are 50 problems designated by the UN.
Yep.
So he took those 50, and then he gets groups together and they work through what is the most efficient way right now to solve those problems. And then you can do an apples to apples comparison on where we should put our dollars, where we should put our efforts.
Yeah, so it's interesting, David, that's kind of what I'm looking at. There's another book that was written by Jay Richard in 2003. He was at the UN. He said 20 global problems would be solved in 20 years. And he talks about those issues. So, that's exactly what I want to do. These are big problems, and we can always take pieces of it. And what I like about, again, this action project is, let's think about this. It is really easy to measure how attitudes change. You can take a measurement of attitudes for both of these groups, the high school kids in the Central Valley and the Bay Area, what they thought about different things. And then at the end of this project, you can take their measure of values as a result of that, and it's measurable. You can measure it. And the interesting thing about it is that if it works, then the software package that you've created, which allows interaction over distances, can be replicated and you can hand it out. Either you can IP it or you can just give it away, and other communities can do it, not only within the United States, but all over the world, because the problem of hyperpartisanship is a global issue right now.
Absolutely.
And so what I'm trying to do, okay, and I'm going to different people and organizations, and if you have recommendations, if you want to help support it, that's what we want to do. We just need, we're looking for $25,000 to $25,000 to start that process, right? We have a possible platform with Google. We have people who are good at moderating. So we have all these pieces. We just got to bring it together, and we were going to be well on our way if COVID-19 hadn't hit. but now we're sort of, we're doing what we can do. So that's another example of a doing project that we can get not only students involved, but our community, all of you involved as well. And it's a very exciting thing if it works. And then that's what we can offer as the World Affair to our community.
So I didn't plan to do this, but I'm very inspired by what you guys are trying to do. And if you like the idea of, for example, the Copenhagen Consensus, it has a type of format, which again can be totally nonpartisan, bipartisan. But it's about efficiency and helping solve problems in a collective, respectful way, with different experts coming in to talk to lay people, because the World Affairs Councils are a mixture of lay people and professionals. So I will contribute. So I will.
Awesome.
You got me. I would put in $5,000 for that. And maybe you can raise that on a match right here or from John's friends who are very wealthy and powerful, more than me.
Well, that's great, David. And what's interesting is this is resonating also with many of the corporates that we reach out to, in addition to the foundations, are saying, if you can teach the next generation civil discourse, how do you deal with these complex issues, then, that's a winner. So I think that we're all on the right track. And unfortunately, we only have about 6 minutes left, so I want to kind of move us on from here and go to another question.
So David, let's be in contact. I'd love to have, love to have a Zoom call. We can talk about this. I'd love to, is Bjorn's, does he have somebody else that he has here we can talk with? I'd love to just keep on following up on that too. That's great.
Thanks again, David, for your input. We really appreciate it. Let me go to another question that we have up, basically saying that how are you interacting with other councils and World Affairs Councils of America? And so we've got 4 of them right here in the Bay Area. Why don't you start there?
Jim, that is a great question. And it was a question that I kept on trying to ask and figure out without seeming, without seeming like, in the know. And it is, as it turns out, it's a lot more complicated than you think. So this is my analog about how, so we do interact with other councils and the World Affairs Council of America. So for all of you, the World Affairs Councils that you hear about, we're not all connected. We're completely independent. And so my analog is that there is, I went to school in New York. So how many Tom's restaurants are there out throughout the United States? There's probably a Tom's restaurant in every single major city in the United States. Well, we are, in that sense, we are, and they're not connected. They're just independent restaurants, okay? So all the World Affairs Councils in the different different cities and states are all independent. We are not connected. We don't have a common governance structure. It's all very different. We just happen to have World Affairs in our name. Now, what happened was that someone really smart in Washington said, with all these World Affairs Councils, maybe we can bring them together and have efficiency. So what they are, in a sense, is the World Affairs Council of America is a trade organization. And they service all the other World Affairs Councils. And we pay a fee as a membership fee for them to help bring people together and try to offer different kinds of speakers and to educate. So we don't work for them. The World Affairs Council works for us individually. And the interesting thing is, what people don't realize is that we're different. We used to be the World Affairs Council of Northern California. Now we're World Affairs. For those of you who don't realize, is that the very well-known Chicago Council of Global Affairs used to be the World Affairs Council of Chicago, and they changed their name. So that's how all this works. And what each turns out that these international organizations, public forums, all have their own comparative advantage. We have a radio program. We own our own building. We do these, we have a large membership. Others, like Philadelphia, is known for their travel program, and we, cooperate in that way. So that's how we do things. But we're all independent. World Affairs Council of America doesn't control us, or we don't answer to them. We, in fact, are members. We are their membership in which they try to help us.
Well, thank you. Well, it looks like we're coming to the end of the session here. There's no more questions that I can see. But we wanted to thank you for participating today. It's been really great to get your feedback and to get commitments like David Bloomberg there saying, okay, I'm ready to step forward here. So we want to follow up with everybody. And if you have any further questions, if you have any other interests that you want to send our way, you know how to get a hold of us. You can look at our website. Philip's brought you up to speed on the Global Philanthropy Forum, which is taking place in September. It's going to be virtual. The Global Citizens Awards for people who are really doing something to help mitigate climate change is taking place in November. We do still expect that to be live and in person, but it may become a virtual event. We'll have to see how things transpire over the summer. But we wanted to really thank you for this time. Thank you for being involved. Philip, anything you want to use for closing here?
Yeah, so I just want to, again, really quickly, I just want to thank all of you. So this is the thing, I usually open with this, but I'll close with this. There are a lot of people, my staff, I made them puzzled when I said, so do you believe the world is a mess or do you believe the world is messy? And some people raise their hand, it's a mess. Some people said it's messy. And then I asked, well, do you know what the difference is? And everyone raised their hand. No, we have no idea. So let me just tell you this, by virtue of you all being here, you actually believe the world is not a mess, which means, I'm throwing up my hands, there's nothing I can do, okay? And I don't want to hear anything, which some of us kind of feel that way. You believe in actuality, all of us believe the world is messy and complex. And what that means is that with enough insight and with enough knowledge, we can do something about it, all right? That's what distinguishes all of us. We're all part of this tribe. And so that's what we want to tap into. That's what I firmly believe, that one person in different ways together can make a big difference. And that's why we're all here. So I wanted to thank all of you for being part of this, for all of you being supportive. Please stay involved. Please listen to our podcast, the radio program, push it out and give me your ideas. I can't say we're going to use all of them, but I can guarantee you that collectively, all of you are going to have amazing ideas that me and myself and even our small staff are not going to be able to think of. So please keep them coming. We're going to do this again. This was great. And thank you so much for being there. And please be well and be safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.